Good morning. My name is Victoria. I am one of the estate planning attorneys for the Koppenberger and Koppenberger law firm. We do primarily do estate planning, but as you'll hear in a second, we actually do more than just that. And then Kelly, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi there, I am Kelly Dipple. I am with Coldwell Banker in Los Gatos, and you'll find out later, but I have special specifications that I work with, like seniors and retirement and relocation. So we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Perfect. Now, the reason we are doing a joint webinar, so for those of you who are Koppenberger clients, you often see that we do have other professionals in our network join us. And the reason we're doing this is for a couple of reasons. One, there is a huge overlap between estate planning and real estate. And a lot of times you need both a qualified real estate agent and an estate planning attorney to make sure that all of your needs are really met, that your questions are answered, and that you do have more than just one type of professional in your pocket. And that is then why we have chosen to do this webinar with Kelly. She does have, as she mentioned, that you'll find out a bit more later, quite a few qualifications that really make her an extremely valuable asset, especially to our more senior clients or those who may have questions about how to help senior parents and people who are in that transition process during the later in life stages. That's something that frankly not a lot of real estate agents offer, and so that is extremely unique, which ties perfectly into our practice at Koppenberger. For those of you who don't know much about us, we also focus a lot on our elderly population and making sure that their needs are met and that they are protected to the best of our abilities. Now, I mentioned we're going to go through quite a bit of information in a relatively short amount of time. So again, if you have any questions that you want to throw in the chat or the Q&A, please do. And then for those of you who maybe have more case-by-case specific questions, we would be happy for either of us to do any consultations that you need. So let's get started. So to give you a quick introduction to Koppenberger, for those of you who don't know us, and for those of you who do, give you a quick reminder of what it is that this firm offers. We are one of the largest estate planning firms in the state. The reason for that is twofold. One, it is for the quantity of attorneys that we have, but it's also, as you'll see in a second, because we have a fantastically large staff. One of the things, though, to keep in mind is that we do more than estate planning. So when you first come to see us, oftentimes we are focused on estate planning and getting the documents you need in effect to protect you, your assets, and your family. But at some point, unfortunately, we all are going to pass away. And so we also have an estate administration team that is there to assist you or your loved ones after someone has passed and figure out what comes next. What do I need to do with my properties? What do I need to make sure the county knows? What do I need to check to check every box? And we're there to walk alongside you. We also have a business and tax department, and this can be extremely beneficial for those of you who are concerned either about the size of your estate, because maybe you do have multiple properties, and so you're concerned about taxes, or it could be about protecting your properties, for example, in the form of LLCs, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. But I also mentioned this wonderful staff that we have, and so we are able to serve the number of clients that we are as efficiently and effectively as we are because of the staff behind us. So if you are already a client, odds are you've met with quite a few of them, and if you're not, you will get to know plenty of them as well. We also have offices all over the state. So if you are not up in Northern California, we can still help you pretty much all over the state of California. And if we don't have a physical location near you, thankfully, we're able to still use Zoom and the phone to get your questions answered and the different things you need done. All right, so we're going to start off by going through what do you need to have in your estate plan. So for those of you who maybe haven't started an estate plan, or maybe you have one that is out of date, this is going to be a really good crash course on why you need certain documents and why they're important. I will also make sure to flag, especially for the documents that are going to impact your real property, which frankly ends up being pretty much all of them. So when we're talking about an estate plan, generally speaking, these are the 4 documents that every person ends up having at one point or another. If you have an estate plan that only has a trust or only has an advanced healthcare directive, Unfortunately, there are going to be protections that are missed. And so it is really important when you're looking at your estate plan that you understand the importance of each one of these documents and how it would apply to you. So first and foremost, we'll start with the Advanced Healthcare Directive. Now, this one, for the most part, does not have anything to do with your real property, but it is extremely important to have if you are over the age of 18, which most of the people that join our webinars are. This is the document that would actually give somebody the authority to act on your behalf to make your medical decisions and even end-of-life care decisions if you no longer could communicate those things to the doctor. Now, I said this mostly doesn't tie to real property, but we do actually in the Koppenberger Advanced Healthcare Directive have a provision in there that says you would prefer to stay at home for your end-of-life care if it was possible. So this is something that allows you to instruct whoever would be taking over for you, not only very specific wishes, but also general wishes that can then tie to you being able to stay at home. If you already have a healthcare directive in place, you want to make sure it was done after 2004. If it was done before 2004, it is actually no longer valid. If you have one, though, that was done after 2004, I still recommend you review that document every 3 to 5 years, because it is an extremely important document that you absolutely want to make sure is in effect and has the people named that are appropriate to make those decisions for you. Now, the next document that absolutely ties to your property is the durable power of attorney or financial power of attorney. This is again a document where you are in a position where you're alive, but unable to communicate or act on your financial wishes. So this is where you actually give somebody the authority to act on your behalf. This is extremely important because if you have hit a point in life that you can no longer manage your finances, maybe you can no longer manage your property and it may either need to be sold or you need to downsize, but you can't make those choices anymore. You need and should want to have this document in place. Again, this is something that everyone over the age of 18 should have. This allows not only for you to have peace of mind that the financial matters and real estate matters can continue to be managed for you, it also is a huge weight off of your family's shoulders because they know they have what is necessary to do what needs to be done. So again, this is one that needs to be up or in place for everyone over 18. The other thing, though, that is extremely important to note is, especially after COVID, banks are instituting or enforcing, I should say, what is called the FINRA rule. It's essentially a rule designed to protect against elder abuse and financial fraud. And so they are not accepting these documents if they are older than 5 years at this point. So if you already have one in place, that's great. But if it is older than 5 years, it is time to come in and have those updated so that they are still able to be accepted and used. Then the next question we generally hear is, okay, do I need a will? Do I need a trust? And why? The reason that this is such a big question is a lot of times actually due to Hollywood. You hear a lot about will readings and somebody's passed away and what did the will say, but very rarely is a trust actually mentioned. But the reality is most of the people we meet with actually need a trust rather than a will. So if you are watching this and you do own a piece of property and or you have more than $184,000 in other assets, a will is not going to be enough to protect you. The biggest asset that will cause an issue is your real property if you don't have it properly protected in a trust. And the reason for that is what is called probate. So at the end of people's lives, something has to happen with your assets. If you have already established a trust, which I'll talk more about in a minute, your trust is going to determine what happens to your assets, when things happen to them, what's going to take place. If you don't, and you have owned a piece of property, unfortunately, that asset has to go through what is called probate. The court at that point is going to determine what happens to that asset. If you still had any outstanding debts on the property or any outstanding debts, they'll make sure that those things are paid. If anybody owed you money, they'll make sure that that money is paid into the estate. And ultimately, it will determine where your assets and where title is going to be transferred. Sometimes it's who you would want, other times it might not be. One of the biggest issues, or two biggest issues with probate, are the fact that probate is extremely lengthy and it costs a ton. When I'm talking about lengthy delays, I'm talking 2 to 5 years for somebody to have their estate stuck in the court and going through the legal process. This is an extremely time-consuming, stressful, and often grief-stricken moment for people who are having to go through probate, because really you are stuck in a court system that you really don't have much control over, if any. The other issue, though, is the cost. So one of the things you'll see in the chat is our website, copenbarger.com. If you have any curiosity as to what probate would actually cost you, I strongly recommend that you go in to our website, you go to the resources tab, and you click on probate calculator. What it will show you is that if you have a house that has a gross value of $1 million, so not what your equity is, but what your gross value of that property is, what you could sell it for, they will put the full 5 to 7% on the gross value. And for a home about $1 million, that's going to be a $46,000 probate bill. That is astronomical, and it can 100% be avoided. So one of the biggest assets that we are looking to protect, again, is your piece of property, because again, that often has some of the largest value that the probate court is absolutely going to put that 5 to 7% fee on. So the good news is you can avoid that. For anybody who owns a piece of property, you need to make sure that not only do you have a trust, which I'll talk about in a second, but also that the property be put into the name of your trust. Now, why is this so important? Well, a trust is actually the contract that, again, you have set up that says, if I were to pass away, this is what I want done with my property and my other assets. This is who I want it to go to. These are the terms and parameters around it, and they can be as specific or general as you want. You, as the person who is called a settlor, are the creator of the trust. So truly, you're setting the terms. It's in your control, nobody else's. You also get to determine who's going to manage things on your behalf if you no longer can. So for a lot of people, we're not just talking about what, and actually for everybody, it's not just what happens when you've passed away. It's what happens if you are alive but incapacitated. Who will actually manage things for you and make sure that your wishes are the ones that continue to be carried out? One of the biggest assets, again, that most people want to make sure would be done in accordance of their wishes is their piece of property. And then again, ultimately, where do you want things to go? Do you want one child in particular to inherit that property? Do you want it to be sold after you've passed away? Maybe you even want it to go to a charity. You get to determine who gets your assets and what happens if you are no longer here. Now, one of the biggest benefits of having a trust is, again, avoiding the cost and delay of probate. But another huge component is that it protects your privacy. If assets or your estate have to go into probate, those things become public. If you keep them in your trust, the good news is the only people who have to know what you had or who's getting it are the people you've specifically designated. So that's huge. But another big one that can be done within your estate plan, and specifically within trust planning, is tax planning. When we're talking about taxes, this is a conversation that pretty much applies to every single person. It might be, what is the size of your estate? Are we concerned about you passing away and there being a death tax or an estate tax that is federally set? Are we concerned about property taxes, capital gains taxes, even income taxes? There are plenty, unfortunately, of taxes that we have in this world, and we want to make sure that you don't pay, or your family doesn't pay, a penny more than is absolutely legally required. And so again, your estate plan allows you to provide for that and protect. But ultimately, we want to make sure your wishes, no one else's, not the courts, are the ones carried out. The benefit of having an estate plan set up ahead of time that you keep up to date is that you retain that control, which again gives you peace of mind that if something happens, you still have control. But it also takes a lot of the burden off of your family and loved ones because they don't have to guess at what you would want or what your wishes would be. With that being said, again, the only downside to a trust is it only protects what it owns. So again, if you have a piece of property, you have checking accounts, savings accounts, non-retirement stock accounts. These are assets that actually have to have title in the name of the trust to fully avoid probate. If they are not, they are still at risk of going through court. And I cannot emphasize enough that your property is going to be the biggest asset you need to be aware of and conscientious of. So if you own property and don't have a trust already, know that that would be a step that should be done during your estate planning, is a deed that would put it in your trust. And if you already have a trust, make sure this is a great time to double check that that property is in the name of that trust and protected. But we understand that things happen. Life goes on. You hear all this information. Hopefully you retain a good amount of it. But again, things happen, people forget, or they just flat choose not to put certain things into a trust. So we at Cope and Barger also create what is called a pour over will that works alongside your trust. It's essentially a safety net. Now, with that being said, its job is to capture assets and put them back into the trust, but we still have to tell the court to do so. So it still does involve some court interference, but it does keep it from going through the full probate process. So again, this is a safety net, but ideally things will have been properly titled in the trust before you pass away. If you have any further questions on this, I know that that can seem confusing and you may have very specific asset questions. Do not hesitate to come and talk to us. Now, that was a pretty quick crash course in not only what the documents are, but also how they tie to real estate. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to tell you a little bit about what that market actually looks like today.
Hi there. Great information, Victoria. And I just kind of reinstate what you just said. We go through this so many times when people are trying to sell their homes and they think it's in a trust and it's not, or somebody thinks they have power of attorney and they don't, and it really delays things and it is just really stressful on the family. So great information. So let's talk about the housing market. What is going on in this housing market? So the pandemic hit in 2020 and it kind of made the market pause. People didn't know what was going on. They were kind of working from home, working remotely, staying at home, and it really made the inventory drop because people weren't selling their house. So in 2021, all of that changed. All of a sudden, people that thought they had to drive to work, they realized that, hey, I can work from home. And all of a sudden, we had this mass group of buyers going after larger homes because they wanted a place for their kids to study. They wanted a place for the, work, to work out, to gather, also multi-generational. They wanted maybe mom and dad to come live with them. And so that, coupled with historically low interest rates dropped below 3%. It was incredible. All of a sudden, housing prices soared 45%. I mean, it was incredible. So then July 2022, the feds jumped in and they decided they were going to start raising the interest rates. In 6 months, interest rates raised from 3% to approximately 7%, in some instances even more, but that was in 6 months' time. Well, that made housing prices drop, but they dropped about 4% overall in California. So when you take the 45% that we saw, and now you take the 4% drop, it's still not a big significant drop. But people see what happened in 2021, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so, sellers they want to attract that, but we're still doing really well, and it's still, what the news would tell you different, it's still a seller's market. but buyers definitely have more weight and more say in how this is going to go. So right now, inventory is historically low. We're down about 80%. It's rising a little bit since January of this year. What's important to know that on the horizons, the millennials, so the millennials are coming into play where they're going to be hitting their mid 30s, and that's going to start coming in around 2024, 2025. Well, the millennials are going to be our next wave of first-time buyers, and they're going to need a place to buy their first home. There's not enough inventory right now for the buyers that we have. And then we're going to have this new wave of buyers coming on, which is great for sellers. Most economists would agree that we are either at the near or at the end of the inflation period. And when that happens, the Feds will reduce the interest rates. This is the 14th time since 1955 that the Feds have aggressively increased interest rates like they have. And that's always followed with where they lower the interest rates. So we know it's coming, we just don't know when it's coming. Fannie Mae predicted that this year interest rates were going to hover around the mid 6.5%, and then by the end of the year it was going to be a flat 6. And when that happens, home prices come up. So housing is the first thing to get affected, but it's also the first to recover. What we're telling buyers is date the rate. If you find a home that you absolutely love, buy it now, refinance later. A lot of lenders right now have special incentives in place where you can actually buy the home that you love, and then you can refinance it by the end of next year with no additional cost. And then for sellers, your equity is still so elevated from the 45% that we've seen. So if you're thinking about selling, wouldn't it make sense that you do it when the inventory is so low and you have an abundance of buyers? And that's where I was saying that sellers are still in the driver's seat, but buyers aren't going to overpay. So what I'm telling all my clients right now is be reasonable. If you price your home reasonably, then the buyers will come. In fact, I just made an offer on a house and we were one of 16. So yeah, if you price your home reasonably, then you're going to get a reasonable price. If you're stuck with the mindset that I want the price that it was in 2021, and you're just not willing to price it reasonably, it will, stay on the market longer, and you probably are not going to be happy with the end price. And then the last thing I wanted just to mention, because it's on the top of everyone's minds, is the Silicon Valley Bank. So the Silicon Valley Bank collapse was hugely a part of fear, but this could also be a good thing. Sorry for the people that were banking there, but it could be a good thing in terms of interest rates. The Feds were going to raise interest rates next week by about 0.5%. But because of the fear that's associated with the Silicon Valley Bank, they've talked about maybe reducing that to a quarter or maybe not reducing it all. Every time the Feds either lower interest rates or they decide not to increase rates, all of a sudden you see a change in buyer frenzy. So that could be a good thing too. So what you should know about selling, and I'll just touch on this real lightly here. So first of all, we offer a full service solution to real estate. We offer free consultation. We will help you understand what the value of your home is. I have a full team that can do everything from decluttering, deciding, what you should take with you, what you should sell. We have someone who does estate sales, and it's not your typical estate sales where you're driving down a street and you see the estate sale sign. We have people that do estate sales online, kind of like an eBay type thing, if you can think of it that way. Hauling services. I mean, basically anything you can think of. I had one client who was moving into assisted living and she had a drawer full of old gold chains that she was going to throw away. And I was like, no. So we actually took it down to a jeweler in Willow Glen and we melted it down. She made like $3,000. Well, I had another client who had an old car that had flat tires and the engine wouldn't start. He just wanted to get rid of it. And so we found somebody that would haul it away. And I think we donated it to Cars for Kids or something like that. But he got a tax write-off for it. So if you need help, we are full service and we are here to help. Anything to do with your real estate needs. So selling your home, again, so the first step is you want to determine the value. And again, the word right now is reasonable. I always do home inspections up front so that way a buyer knows exactly what is going on with the property so they can put their best foot forward. If there's any repairs or updates that are needed, like let's say we have the inspection and there's maybe a leak or something, then we get that repaired up front so that way a buyer again can put their best foot forward. Coordinate staging. I do all the photos, videos, floor plans, virtual tours, property website. I also have a group that a lot of these things that I mentioned can be paid through escrow. So there's little or no upfront costs to selling your home, which is really great because not everyone has, a pot of money just sitting there to, prep and get your house ready for sale. So that's also important to know. And we don't charge for that. So, excuse me. So options for selling your home. So people sell their homes for different reasons. Some people are selling their homes because right now the biggest demographic that we have right now is over the age of 55. So a lot of those sellers are selling because they're moving into retirement communities or assisted living facilities. But also we have people that are relocating out of California. Maybe they want warmer weather or just a change of life, because again, over the age of 55 means retirement, empty nesters. So we're seeing people selling for all different kinds of reasons, and we can help you. We are global, and I have a global reach of referrals. So as I mentioned earlier, I am SRES certified, which is a senior real estate specialist, which means I'm an advocate for seniors. But as I mentioned, we are full service. And my ultimate goal is to make the home buying and selling process easy. I want to exceed your expectations every step of the way. So that is my goal. I am super proud to be, the last 3 years, I am part of the presidential elite, which is I am top 1% worldwide, and I'm part of Coldwell Banker, who is worldwide. So just like Kopp & Barger, we have offices around the globe with a global reach that can help you, whether you're buying, selling, relocating, whatever your real estate needs are, we are here to help.
Perfect. Thank you. And I really cannot again emphasize enough, especially for our more senior clients, or especially for those who have lost a parent and now they're in that phase of actually having to sort through everything, sell things, get the home on the market. Having somebody where you can go to them and they do more than just sell your home is a value that I really can't put a price tag on. The number of questions we get from people asking, do you know someone who can do an estate sale? Do you know somebody who could help me declutter? Do you know somebody? To have it in one space, one spot is really beneficial to that family member or the family as a whole, and frankly keeps things moving a lot quicker. I also know for somebody like my father that at the point he's looking to move, I call him a classy hoarder. The things that he has are nice, but he has a lot of them. And so he's definitely somebody that when it comes time to move, probably would not want to take every single thing. So having somebody though that actually sees the value in what he has and makes sure that either he does know to take it or knows, no, don't just throw it out. Let's make sure you get a value back for it, can really have a huge impact on the family and that person. But tying it all back to seniors. So a lot of, again, the concerns that we're seeing have to do with our senior population. One of the large concerns right now is what happens if I get sick, and then what happens to me, my property, my family? How do I afford long-term care? All of these things that come with, unfortunately, getting older, and then at some point having the risk of becoming ill. We are seeing a staggering increase in long-term care needs. That is not only how many people need it, it's also the length of time it's needed. And then, of course, the cost that is associated with that component. So then we start looking at, okay, how do our clients pay for this? We know they have a long-term care need, but how in the heck are they actually going to pay for it? Well, there's quite a few options, but some of them are going to be better than others. We don't want you to be forced into any one option, but we do want to at least let you know what some of those options may be.
So of course, one option would be to sell your home, but that's not always the best decision because when you sell your home, you have capital gains. And capital gains is an income tax. It's something you'd really need to talk with your tax expert or an estate attorney because it really depends on how you placed your property in a trust, or maybe you didn't. That plays a huge role in it. So selling your home is definitely something that a lot of my clients do end up doing because their hands are tied and they need the money to help pay for the exorbitant care for assisted living. Another option, so some people don't want to pay the capital gains, or maybe your family members, they don't want to pay the capital gains and they'd rather hold the property and just wait. And so you can rent your home. Renting a home, you would have to get, well, you don't have to, you could have somebody do it if you have a family member that is savvy and can handle it. But, you know, renting a property means you have somebody that has to get a renter in there that is a trusted renter, somebody who's able to pay the rent, somebody who can oversee the phone calls when something goes awry with the property. A property manager can take anywhere from 6 to 15% of your monthly rents. I do have property managers that I connect with my clients, so that is another option. And then a third option is if you're living in the home, is like Victoria said, a lot of our seniors, they don't want to leave their homes. They want to stay in their home. And so if you have in-home care, I mean, the cost can be exorbitant. I have a client who's paying over $160,000 a year in home care. And so another alternative would be a reverse mortgage. And that is basically where you're pulling the equity in from the home that you're living in to kind of help pay for the daily expenses of living in the home. And of course, the assisted living care that you have. But a reverse mortgage must be paid off within 6 months of the time that you sell the home or when the homeowner passes away. So that also is not always the best alternative, but it is an option.
All right. And then one other option that most people actually don't know about, and in large part, this is because we have created in-house a trust that is designed to protect against long-term care, especially long-term care nursing costs.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that if you work with Koppenberger, you will hear about is what we call either our Medi-Cal trust or long-term care protection trust. The idea behind this trust is it actually allows you to keep all of your assets and qualify for Medi-Cal. Now, most people hear if we have more than $2,000, if we have anything above that, we are automatically not going to qualify. Well, there's a couple of things that are wrong with that. It actually changed last year in July to now if you have less than $130,000 and your residence, you could actually qualify for Medi-Cal. So that was a huge increase from the $2,000 most of us had come to know about. So if you do know anybody who either didn't think that they could qualify for Medi-Cal or had tried before July of last year and was rejected, relook. Again, if they have less than $130,000, now they actually could qualify for Medi-Cal. But for everybody else who has more than that 130,000, again, you still could qualify with this long-term care protection trust. Your primary residence would be protected in this trust immediately. Now, your residence, if you only have a piece of property and you again have less than 130,000, you'd be protected regardless. But if you sold it, if you rented it, then outside of the trust, it would be used to disqualify you. With the trust, you could sell it, you could rent it, you could do whatever you wanted to with it, and it would still remain protected. Your secondary properties would disqualify you from Medi-Cal unless, again, you have this trust. All of your assets are able to be protected within this. So again, you have additional options. Now, this is something we talk to our clients about whether you are 18 or 99. And the reason for that is at some point or another, most people either personally experience the need for long-term protection or they have a family member who ends up in some kind of long-term care. So again, if you have any questions on this, this is just one more option that you have to make sure you aren't forced to sell your home or get rid of all of your assets. Then as far as protecting your property, we also then start looking at LLC protection. So this is more focused on people who do have secondary properties. Not only could you be concerned about protecting it from long-term nursing and the things that come along with that, but maybe long-term nursing isn't your concern, but you do want to make sure if you have a secondary property that it couldn't be taken away from you, or that if something happened on that property, whatever happened couldn't cascade into your other assets. So your LLC can be a huge benefit to keeping those assets protected. The other thing to keep in mind, and I'm going to talk more about what's called Proposition 19 in just a second, but if you are looking to purchase a property, talk to us about an LLC first. One of the things that happened in 2021 is Proposition 19, which again, I'll mention in a second. Proposition 19 drastically reduced and actually eliminated completely the ability for a rental or secondary property to keep your property taxes the same once you pass away. But if you actually have an LLC established and it purchases a new piece of property, you can avoid that property tax reassessment after you pass away. So again, if you're going to purchase a property, absolutely consider setting up an LLC beforehand. The other thing, though, to keep in mind is Kelly mentioned refinancing is an option that you have. The biggest issue with refinancing that you should be aware of, though, is that if you have a property in a trust and you refinance, generally speaking, the refinance company is going to pull that property out of the trust. The other issue is they don't generally put it back into the trust when that process is done. They normally just say, okay, the refinance is done, our terms are done, have a nice day. And so we have many clients who come and talk to us, and I'll ask, is your property in the trust? They say yes. I say, have you refinanced? They say yes. I say, did you do a deed to put it back in the trust? They say no. Because the refinance company is not going to tell you often, they may not even know that that is a step that needs to be taken. So this goes back to why it's important to come check in with us every 3 to 5 years to make sure we catch that, but also to have a real estate agent who gets it. The more people in your life who get this, who understand the risk of doing certain things, whether it's refinance or otherwise, the more likely you will have the knowledge and protection that is needed. Okay. Then hopping over to inherited properties. So one of the things Kelly did talk about was capital gains. So what happens if you sell? Well, if you have owned the property and you sell it during your lifetime, capital gains is generally speaking something you are going to need to be aware of. But when we have people come and ask, should I transfer the property now? Should I sell it during my life? Or should I wait until I'm gone to have it transferred to my people after I've passed away? Is that the better choice? Generally speaking, the answer is if you can wait until you have passed to transfer the property, there are significantly larger capital gains tax benefits to that. Whenever somebody passes away, or in at least most cases, a piece of property is going to get a new value, a new basis. If the person who has inherited it sells it for that new value, that new basis, they actually don't pay capital gains taxes. So that allows, if you sell a property for $1 million after you've inherited it, you get the true $1 million minus any closing costs and that sort of thing. So that can be a huge advantage. But this again means it's somebody who's dealing with a property that wasn't theirs, who now needs a trusted real estate agent to come along and help them with figuring out, how do I sell it? How do I make sure I do avoid capital gains at all costs? That sort of thing. So this is where the two really keep overlapping. Then circling back to Proposition 19. So this was a proposition that was frankly, it was wrapped in a pretty bow, but it had some pretty significant consequences. Now, if you are a senior over the age of 55, there were actual benefits to you if you want to move. As Kelly mentioned, there's a variety of reasons people want to move. Maybe your family's moved further away, so you want to get close to them and your grandkids. Maybe they're too close to you and you actually would like to get further away at this point. Maybe it's long-term care. There's a variety of reasons. But the good news is that if you are over 55, you can move to a different home in the state and retain your tax base up to 3 times in your lifetime. Now, again, it is important when you're doing this to talk to your estate planner, your real estate agent, and your CPA to make sure that you are properly documenting what has happened so that you can transfer that tax base. The downside again, though, is it greatly restricted what can be transferred to children when you pass that would be able to keep your current property tax basis. The only home that would be allowed to keep your taxes would be your primary residence, and only if that child occupies the property and they have to claim it within 1 year of your passing, and they have to stay permanently or until they decide to sell it at a later time. So this really did greatly restrict how we can allow people to keep property taxes on their homes. Now, I mentioned LLCs earlier, so that is one of the ways. The other option is that you can put within your trust what is called right of first refusal language. It's essentially language that maximizes options for children. So if property taxes are a concern and you have more than one child, come in and talk to us about this right of first refusal language. One other option that people do have, now it's not as commonly used, but especially if you have an estate that is, well, today larger than 13 million, but in 3 years is larger than 5 million, you would have what is called a federal estate tax problem. That means you would pass away and your estate would very likely then be hit with a federal estate tax. So one of the ways that you can help avoid that and make sure that the properties aren't going to cause a huge tax is by using what is called a charitable remainder trust. Now, this is really designed, again, for people who either have significant charitable intent, which is fantastic, and or they want to make sure that their estate is not going to be hit with a large tax after they pass away. So if you have any questions on how would I give through a charitable trust, I do have tax concerns for my estate. This is a helpful tool and we are more than happy to chat with you about it. Now we are starting to wrap up. And again, I told you we would be going through quite a bit of information and I don't think that I lied on that one. So if you have any questions or anything else comes up, we have our contact information that you'll see in just a second. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Essentially, what I hope that you took away from today is not only are there numerous documents that every adult needs, but it's also really important to make sure you plan when you can and you work with qualified professionals who are able to walk alongside you and frankly take a lot of the burden off of you. So with that being said, how can we help? Now, this is the same for both Kelly and for Koppenberger. We want to make sure we're looking at what matters most to you. For every person, whether it's setting up an estate plan and what those terms look like, or why are you moving? What is your goal? What is your timeline? What is the value you're wanting out of this? All of those things factor in. So it's really important to, again, work with somebody who wants to have those conversations with you and takes the time to get to know you and get to understand what are your goals and what are the things you're hoping to accomplish. Now, for Koppenberger, one of the best things about working with us is the fact that our goal is to educate our clients. We have been open since 1979, and we have, again, a phenomenal team of attorneys who are constantly making sure that they keep up to date on what's happening in the law, how does it impact our clients, and specifically, how does it impact you, not just the general. And so we do these education events, we do things to make sure that rather than you having to go track the information down and figure out how it applies and get in touch with us, we do it in reverse. We figure out the information, we look at how it applies to you, and we contact you. And then Kelly, if you want to say something on your part.
Yes, of course. So when you're working with me, you also are working with Coldwell Banker. Coldwell Banker is the largest brokerage worldwide. As I mentioned before, I am one of the top real estate agents worldwide as well. And the senior real estate specialist, if you are working with someone and you are over the age of 55, just make sure that they have that designation. It's very important. I am a global luxury partner. I am also part of the worldwide. I can't speak worldwide real referral network. So I have referrals around the globe. I just helped somebody move to Arizona. I had another client move to Bend, Oregon. We just had somebody move to Tahoe. Somebody moved to Florida. So I have people throughout the nation that can help you if you are looking to buy outside of California as well. My goal again is just to make the whole process easy from beginning to end. And then even after the sale, people are still contacting me for, maybe they need somebody to help with fix something at the house or what have you. I'm always here for you. Please reach out.
Perfect. All right, and then here is the Koppenberger contact information. I'll put Kelly's up in the chat in just a second, but if you're looking to get in touch with her and you don't have her information, you can always give us a call. Now, for those of you who sat and watched us this morning, as far as the Koppenberger side goes, you are now entitled to a free consultation. So whether you're a client or not a client yet, you would be able to come in and meet with us for no cost at all. We absolutely want to make sure that your questions get answered, that you, your assets, and your family remain protected. And thank you guys again for joining us.
Thank you.